200 Moroccan travel agents have demonstrated for a second time this month at the headquarters of the Ministry of Tourism. The county abruptly shut its borders in November last year due to the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Business people are demanding the reopening of borders, citing the dramatic collapse of the industry in the wake of the pandemic. Morocco suspended all flights from November 29th to January 31st. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian cabinet has approved the lifting of a 6-month state of emergency. The cabinet says this is in light of the changing security condition in the country. Ethiopia declared a state of emergency in November last year after Tigray forces were considering marching to the capital of Addis Ababa. However, the government says the country has reached a stage where threats can be neutralized through law enforcement. Burkina Faso's new military junta has held a meeting with members of ousted President Roch Kabore's government. Now, according to sources, they implored ministers not to leave the country unless given permission. Now, Monday's coup came amid an increasingly bloody Islamist insurgency that has killed thousands of people across West Africa. Meanwhile, leaders of the Economic Community of West African States will hold an extraordinary summit tomorrow to discuss the coup. All right, joining me now to talk about the developments in Burkina Faso is Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, who is the University of Johannesburg Center for Africa and China Studies candidate there. Good to have you with us tonight. What is the indication with particularly the latest meeting that was held with some of the ministers of where the direction is as far as the security of Burkina Faso is concerned?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and good evening to your viewers. Well, when it comes to the security situation in Burkina Faso at the moment, obviously, everything is happening in limbo, so to say, because we do not know exactly even the whereabouts of even not only the president, but even some of the members of some of his close associates. So that is quite a worrying trend. And it also talks about just how maybe ineffective the president was actually, starting from 2015 when the insurgency started happening, even up to November last year, especially when about 53 members of the security personnel in Burkina Faso were killed. So what is happening at the moment is really a culmination of a crisis that has been long time in the brewing. But it is quite concerning right now because we have seen what the military has done in Mali, where they are reluctant to relinquish power and let in a civilian government to be in power. So that is what is happening in Burkina Faso. Even these conditionalities that have been imposed on previous ministers show just how much the military has taken over hold of the country.
Yeah. Now, of course, there was widespread international condemnation of the coup. But initially, we saw a degree of significant support by ordinary Burkinabes to this coup. But there are reports now that they are also becoming increasingly more vocal in reaching out to, for example, Russia to come and intervene.
Well, there was a bit of euphoria when President Roch Kabore was deposed. And that euphoria came because before the coup itself, ordinary citizens had actually called for the resignation of the president. But then in the long term, what we'll be seeing, this is quite concerning because the military at the moment could look as though it will be more stringent and more effective in fighting the rebels, especially in the northern part of the country. But in the long run, this is a very significant setback in the country's tentative steps towards democratization. So citizens might feel a forced and myopic sense of comfort at the moment with the army, but in the long run, what has happened is disastrous. When it comes to enlisting personnel from Russia, well, this is a common thing in countries that are desperately trying to fight insurgencies. We've seen that even in Mozambique now, in the Cabo Delgado province, the Russian personnel have been enlisted by the Mozambican government to fight against insurgencies even there. So this happens, but then in the long run as well, you also have to look at the interests of those who are floating to such countries to help up with the security instability.
Of course, these are highly trained soldiers that we are dealing with here who have been leading this particular coup. What more do we know about them and their ability to respond to the insurgency?
Well, the person now who has taken over the MPSR, as they call it, is Paul Henry Damiba. What we know about him is that he has trained at a military facility in France. He wrote a book last year purporting to have some expertise of some sort on how West Africa should fight terrorism. So he has sold himself well in that particular way, because the main premise of this coup d'etat was that President Kabore was very ineffective, and he had abandoned the soldiers who had to go for 2 weeks without food last year in November. So Damiba has come in to fill in what he thinks is a gap that the president had. So yeah, he has sold himself in that particular way. And it is also interesting to note that he was promoted last month in December by President Kabore, ironically so, to be the commander of the 3rd military region of Burkina Faso. So that is what we know. We do not know, obviously, the more junior members that are accompanying his team. But yeah, that is the impression that we have at the moment.
The impact of this then on the stability generally now in Burkina Faso, you're worried about that? Could this lead into maybe even the country wanting to close itself out from even ECOWAS, who are having a meeting? And what do you think that meeting will yield?
Well, what happened in Mali and what happened in Guinea last year, and now what has happened in Burkina Faso, has actually shown that there is a trend in West Africa towards military coup d'etats. And also it actually shows that the readiness of some countries in West Africa to flout or to disregard whatever ECOWAS has done, because the sanctions and the actions that ECOWAS took on Mali and Guinea were supposed to discourage what happened to Burkina Faso. But then we saw that when sanctions were imposed on Mali, Guinea almost immediately fell in step with Mali and offered to support it. So this actually shows that, you know what, these countries are actually ready to ignore whatever ECOWAS is doing. So as ECOWAS meets obviously tomorrow, we would expect that they will be more forceful in not only demonizing what has happened in Burkina Faso, but also try to discourage other countries from doing that. But this is a very delicate task for ECOWAS, because in as much as it is against the coup that happened in Burkina Faso, citizens of Burkina Faso themselves are actually in support. There are some citizens who are in support of that. And this shows even in the manner of which the ruling party of Burkina Faso, well, we can now call it the erstwhile ruling part of Burkina Faso, had its headquarters burned. So this actually shows that it is not only a military coup, but it is a military coup with the buy-in of the citizens. So now ECOWAS has to trade a fine line here between condemning the coup, but also making sure that it caters to the whatever statements it makes. Those statements should actually cater to the needs of ordinary Burkinabe citizens, 1.5 million of which have been displaced because of the military instability in the country.
Is the military at least united in Burkina Faso in running the country?
It is difficult to note at the moment, because there is an element at the back, lurking at the back of all this, obviously, was the incarceration of General Gilbert Diendere, who is now at the Salonge barracks, where the president is reportedly being held as well, who was a very close associate of the previous president, who was President Blaise Compaoré. So now we don't really know whether these members who have taken over the country at the moment are actually in concert with President Blaise Compaoré, who has been charged now with the 1987 assassination of Thomas Sankara. So we don't know whether they're in concert with him, and if they're in concert with him, whether or not the military itself is split in different factions. That can only be speculation at the moment.
Dr. Emmanuel Matambo, appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining us from the UJ Center for Africa-China Studies there, unpacking for us the situation currently prevailing in Burkina Faso.